Hi, my name is Kaylee, and I'm presenting my thesis, Exploring the Heroines of Shakespeare's Comedies Who Define Strong, Portia, Rosalind, and Beatrice. Recently, the scholarly and popular press has been debating whether Shakespeare's plays should continue to be taught. Are they still relevant? Are they sexist? A good place to start is with Portia of The Merchant of Venice, Rosalind of As You Like It, and Beatrice of Much Ado About Nothing. So how did Portia, Rosalind, and Beatrice of Shakespeare's middle comedies defy the patriarchy and get away with it? To pull off this feat, these ladies must be talented, brilliant, and create the right circumstances. These three are among Shakespeare's most powerful women, and each one able to make her way in a fictive world that is dominated by men, as Michael L. Stapleton explains. It's important to note that a central element of Shakespeare's treatment of women is always their sex. Paula Berggren clarifies that it is not as a focus of cultural observation or social criticism, though these may be discerned, but primarily as a mythic source of power, an archetypal symbol that arouses both love and loathing in the male. Berggren suggests that the root of the heroine's power is the innate base of power from a Shakespearean archetype, which stems from the ancient power of their sex. The design of the heroine's identities leaves the indelible impression of female comic power, or as Emma Smith verbalizes, clear, proactive, funny, verbal, or in a word, Shakespearean. Rosalind, Portia, and Beatrice are the strongest heroines of Shakespeare's comedies, which is evident in their personalities, their skills, their knowledge, their educating those around them, and their creation of a more equal marriage in their time. Without fathers and having to learn through experience, these women do extraordinarily well for themselves. Portia's father dies shortly before The Merchant of Venice begins. We are introduced to her while she is still mourning her father, but also mourning what is to come as a product of his will. Beatrice, like Rosalind, is what Penny Gay defines as a poor relation, and invited into her uncle's household. Rosalind is a guest in her uncle's court. Since her uncle, Duke Frederick, banished her father, Duke Sr., she spent her life without a father figure, and Duke Frederick is far from fulfilling that role. Rosalind remains at court only as the companion of her cousin, and her father's being banished is also part of Rosalind's initial hardship. At the beginning of their respective plays, all three of these heroines have a hardship from which they need to recover. Portia is in the difficult situation of being bound by her father's will. In Portia's introduction, impatience arises due to the belittling of her as the prize in a literary game. Her father had set up a test of character which the suitors must partake in if they wish to marry Portia. Contrastingly, Beatrice has lost the heart of Signor Benedick and explains to Don Pedro, "Indeed, my lord, he lent it me a while, and I gave him use for it, a double heart for his single one. Marry, once before he won it of me with false dice. Therefore, your grace may well say I have lost it." So Beatrice acknowledges that she was hurt by Benedick previously, at some time before Much Ado About Nothing starts. And very early in As You Like It, Rosalind too is banished by Duke Frederick, claiming she has the sympathies of the people and will turn against them. A heroine's social status can be as limiting as her gender. Rosalind and Beatrice are both, as Angela Thirlwell describes, conspicuous nieces who live in their uncle's households as cousin companions. For example, Marguerite A. Tassi asserts Beatrice's social position is of some importance to understanding the paradoxical expression of her character. As orphaned, unmarried, and female, Beatrice was taken into the household of Leonato as a dependent, living on the kindness of kin. Upon Duke Frederick banishing Rosalind, Celia comes to her defense. "But now I know her. If she be a traitor, why, so am I. We still have slept together, rose at an instant, learned, played, ate together." Celia's argument in defense of her cousin reveals their equal upbringing. Stapleton argues that despite many parallels with Rosalind and Beatrice, Portia's power seems so much greater. It seems her power comes from her wealth, as she has more capital at her disposal than perhaps any other Shakespearean character, and knows the extent of its use in her society. The knowledge of what her money will and will not allow her to do highlights the differences between gender and class restrictions in her society. Cross-dressing was the inconsistency of societal canon that allowed Portia and Rosalind to maneuver in the man's world without being restricted by the social limitations for females in the time. Paula Bergren reiterates the notion that the aimless and impromptu nature of the heroine's transformation confirms our identity instead of shattering it. Rosalind treads carefully in her uncle's court, but once the notion of disguise is introduced, Rosalind starts developing her own ideas and her own wit. Similarly, Portia, as Balthazar in the Venetian court, had the same knowledge and good nature before putting on pants. This suggests Bergren is correct in her assertion that the disguise provides the opportunity for, but not the substance of, their authority. Linda Beamer argues the theory of the women as the other in Shakespeare. The feminine other has the freedom to play at change, to disguise herself, and then to remove the disguise. For example, Rosalind can disguise herself as the boy Ganymede to accomplish her goals and, once complete, switch back and resume her female identity as Rosalind. The change anticipated becomes permanent in the Forest of Arden, where the earlier relationship dynamic between Celia and Rosalind is reversed. Now Rosalind dominates Celia. Leggett claims Ganymede to be genuinely liberating and provides Rosalind a safe way to develop her identity, without possible repercussions that could follow her back to her feminine self. This freedom allows Rosalind to test the truthfulness of Orlando's heart. The same point is made by Anna Jameson's conviction that Portia's disguise and her deportment as the young and the learned doctor would appear forced and improbable in any other woman, but in Portia are the simple and natural result of her character. Portia's concern for her husband and his best friend Antonio is genuine and ultimately makes her decide to travel to the strange place of Venice. While she is in disguise, Portia's culture can recognize her power and prestige within the mold of acceptance due to societal restrictions. Beatrice does not cross-dress. She doesn't need to. Her circumstances have required her to learn things early, especially about herself. Much ado in the title symbolizes not only the exchange of apparel through which social status, moral character, or even spiritual identity could change. Alison Finlay argues that while one can cross-dress to find a new facet of themselves, one can also change their morals and lower his or her pride to accomplish the same feat. Penny Gay characterizes her views on the society of Much Ado About Nothing. This is not a world in which a girl can disguise herself as a boy and not be recognized, even by her lover. It is rather a society structured very like the Elizabethan one which first witnessed it, in which the niceties of interpersonal behavior are directed by accepted rules. Beatrice cannot leave her home like Rosalind and Portia. Women had very restricted access to education and educational institutions, so Shakespeare employs wit to show their intelligence. In the 1600s, Juliet Dusenberry insightfully explains, wit was regarded as suggesting defiance against society, the patriarchy. The Elizabethan society regarded wit as a separate type of rebellion, as it broke the standard of limited to no education for women. Thus, wit adopted the connotation of being an inevitable sign that more women's standards would be broken. The heroines talk, act, and are treated in such a way that the audience understands them to be intelligent women. Shakespeare glorified the image of the bright young girl without explaining her qualifications and education. For example, Portia's wit enables her to be a true morality figure. Portia employs her wit in what was once, as Elmer Edgar Stoll says, a lady's chief art and sport and crowning glory, conversations. Conversations were the best way for a woman to show her intelligence and impress others. All three heroines take advantage of this. A key component of their character is their wit, which they must develop on their own. Margaret Warner Beckham argues, as scholars stated previously, that it was not that Shakespeare thought women incapable of wit, but that granting women wit allows them to control and lead those around them, and use it as a sort of protection. Portia utilizes her wit for amusement and as a teaching tool. Stapleton believes that Shakespeare endows Portia with a feature that distinguishes her from most of his other women characters, an extenuation of her wit, the formidably eloquent power that allows her to shape the events of her play almost single-handedly. However, upon comparing this description to the other heroines, I found it can easily be applied to Rosalind or Beatrice as well. C. Herford explains Beatrice's wit to Rosalind's because both create and maintain the wit-fraught attitude of the play on their own. Beatrice's personality is a combination of her wit and sorrow. Barbara Everett argues this combination is what makes her Shakespeare's true heroine. Rosalind's wit has no hint of a sting. Edward Dowden claims Rosalind's wit and bright play of intellect protect her from her own eager and vivid emotions. Stoll argues that her wit and humor are used to cover the indirect utterance of her passion and utmost happiness. I agree with these scholars as their assertions support the understanding that Rosalind's wit is used as protection to distort and disguise her true emotions. For example, when she is Ganymede pretending to be Rosalind, she is able to conceal her identity and feelings through language and wit. All three women used their wit to express their frustration with their limited social position, but also to educate themselves, their lovers, and their societies. Rosalind instructs a seminar on how to love her, astonishing Orlando with its brilliance and quip, whipping her lover-to-be into someone worthy of her, and with realistic expectations. However, Stapleton exhorts us to consider how much effect Beatrice's wit is permitted to have by the men in Much Ado. I would argue that despite Benedict's relentless efforts to keep pace with her, he cannot keep her from speaking and is deeply hurt by her daggers of wit and his failure to stop her from launching them at him. When Bassanio admits to Portia that he no longer has the ring, which she gave to him to pledge and symbolize their love, she feigns anger to indicate what she considers to be proper justice. Perhaps her motives are beyond question and her feelings are justified. Portia uses her emotional intelligence to channel her rage as the driving force to help Bassanio understand the significance of his lesson. I am arguing that the heroines play the role of an educator, and the men in their plays have a difficult time learning some of the lessons necessary. Portia gives more to Bassanio Antonio in the city of Venice than any could ever reciprocate. By saving Antonio's life, she has saved Bassanio's best friend, and to do so in the trial allows the city to preserve, as Karen Newman says, both its law and its precious Christian citizen. Portia's education of Venetian society improves its well-being, and she has shown corruption that can result in the quest of money, and Bassanio is no longer imbalanced. Concerning Rosalind's dazzling epilogue, Kiernan Ryan admits the temptation to view her as an authorial figure, a surrogate for the dramatist himself, where the play is in her hands. The epilogue and its delivery allow Rosalind to educate the audience without doing so offensively or directly. It is mostly comprised of conditional clauses and hypothetical notions. If it be true that good wine needs no bush, 'tis true that a good play needs no epilogue. Beatrice's more limiting society prevents her from directly condemning or educating her society. Beatrice criticizes her society indirectly by fulfilling the role of vengeful spirit to punish the undeserved dishonoring of her cousin at the altar and women at large. Tassie argues that Beatrice fulfills Peter A. French's authority condition of vengeance, which vindicates Beatrice for wielding her moral authority against the wrongdoer of her community, Claudio. It is evident through their identity, wit, intelligence, and education of others that these are persistent and powerful heroines. Without fathers and having to learn through experience and act in disguise, these three female characters dominate their respective plays and remake their societies. Sometimes it is true that submitting is better than outright rebelling. However, as George Bernard Shaw suggests, generations of properly governed young ladies taught to say no 3 times at least have miserably perished. In contrast, these Shakespeare heroines have survived thanks to the right amount of rebellion. Thank you.